Hello and welcome to our Education USA presentation on your top 10 Common App questions answered. I already see that some people have found the emojis, so thanks so much. You can feel free to use those to interact throughout. We also have a chat on the side where I see people are saying hello, hi everyone. You can also ask your questions there in the chat. There is a Q&A chat function, so if you find your question isn't getting answered because there are a lot of people saying hello, feel free to throw it in there, and I will do my best to answer as many questions as possible throughout. Feel free to shout out where you are tuning in from today. I always love to get a sense of where across Canada people are joining us from, whether you're on your 5 p.m. on the Atlantic time zone or 1 p.m. in the Pacific. We've got people probably from all across the country with us. I'm also seeing some familiar names here, so good to see you all. Today's session is going to tackle what I'm calling the Common App most asked questions. And honestly, these are the questions that are most asked to me. I've been been doing this job for quite a long time. My name is Jenica Heim. I'm an Education USA advisor, and I've been doing this for about 10 years. And essentially, these are the questions that people tend to ask me. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with just first letting you know a little bit about Education USA, and then a little bit more, and then we'll just jump right into the presentation. All right. Yes, we've got New Brunswick, Montreal, Toronto, Oakville, Markham, Edmonton, Regina, Chilliwack, Delta. Awesome. Hamilton. I'm sure we've got Ottawa in the house here too. All right, we'll go ahead and move to what is Education USA? So Education USA is a U.S. Department of State program. We have more than 400 international student advising centers around the world. I am your advisor here in Canada. I'm based in Ottawa at the Fulbright Canada organization. And I offer free advising services to students all across the country. You can learn more about our network of advisors like me all over the world at educationusa.state.gov. Our center in Canada, like I mentioned, is in Ottawa, and beyond just free advising overall, to dive deeper into that, we can do essay review, help you narrow your list. Depending on where you are in the process, we're happy to help. So essentially, right now, this particular presentation is a little more geared towards grade 12 or students who are currently applying for next fall. If you're in grade 9 or 10, this might be a little too detailed for you. Feel free to stick around. But this session is really focused in on the students who are currently applying. So if you are currently applying, do feel free to stay in touch, ask more detailed questions, and I can help you as you polish off that application. We do webinars like this one, fairs, in-person and virtual events. So make sure to join us. We're most active on our Instagram channel. So you can go ahead and follow us on Instagram if you use Instagram. So that's that. And if you want to close, you either hit follow Instagram or there's a little X in the corner and you can close out that pop-up. You can also see here the email address, ottawa@educationusa.org, and the website, educationusacanada.ca. And if you'd like to have an advising session, feel free to just reach out and we can organize that. As you can imagine, this time of year gets really busy. So you definitely want to do that soon if that's the case. All right, as promised, that's just a very quick primer on Education USA. Let's jump right in. So question number one, and you're going to the questions will be revealed as we go through here. Which universities use the Common App? So more than 4,700 universities in the United States use the Common Application. So I'm sorry, not use the Common Application. I got flustered there for a second. There are more than 4,700 universities in the United States and colleges. A lot of options, but not all of them use the Common App. There we go. Let's get the sentence right. So who uses it? Go to commonapp.org and you can see all the institutions that use the Common App. And what I'm going to do is pop back and forth between this and screen sharing. So we are going to actually be in the Common App together. There are 1,011 US member colleges and universities that use the Common App, and there's actually 1,072 that use the Common App in total. So there are actually international universities that use this as well, not as many, but there are some Canadian schools and other schools around the world that use Common App. So you can apply elsewhere outside the States. But as you heard from my number, that this is around, it's around 25% of universities. And if you actually lump in colleges as well, it's more like 20%. So there's a lot of schools that don't necessarily use the Common App. So I'm going to go ahead and unleash a poll. Do the Ivy League universities use the Common App? So that's our first poll. So that should have jumped up and you can click either yes or no. So go ahead and let me know what you think. All right, we've got some respondents coming through. Okay, so there are 8 Ivy League universities listed there in the poll, and all 8 of them do use the Common Application. So the group overall got this one right. About 80% of you chose that this is the case. All right, now the next one's going to get a little bit harder. Which of these universities use the Common App? So you can select more than one, and you can let me know which ones you think. So these are all popular universities that many students choose to apply to in the United States. You may have heard of many, if not all, of these schools. So I can tell you that more than one use the Common App. So you should be choosing at least one. All right. Most people are saying that Stanford and University of Michigan use the Common App. That is correct. Good job. The other one that uses it is Johns Hopkins University. They're also a Common App school. The 3 on here that don't use it are Georgetown, MIT, and University of California. So just because a school is a popular university that you're familiar with doesn't mean that it's a Common App university. You have to be a member of Common App and decide that you want to use this application. Now, this whole presentation is focused on the Common App just because a lot of students use it. You're here because you're using it, most likely, but know that it might not be the only application you fill out. So how do you know if your school is part of the Common App? So you can use the search engine on the Common App, or if you're not seeing in the school, make sure you go to the university's website, and that will be the first location to really see which application you should be using. You can apply to up to 20 universities using the Common Application, and please note that each one will have a fee. So I'm going to toggle over to sharing the screen. So hopefully, if you're on, for many of you on this webinar are already familiar with what the Common App looks like. But if we do have some people here who it's their first time, you go to commonapp.org, and here's what the main page looks like. You will create a login using this here, and you can start searching for which schools are in the Common App using Find a College. It will list all the universities available to you, and you can use different parameters to start determining what could be a good fit for you. Things like type of institution, campus setting, and region of the United States. You can see even Canada and other places around the world are part of the Common App. So this is a great way to get started about learning about different schools. And for each individual university that you might be interested in, they do have a little bio about that school. And then you can even just jump right into the application process. So as mentioned, each university will typically have some sort of fee, but that gets us to the next question. There are fee waivers available. And so there is going to be a question on the common application. Can I have a fee waiver? Or would you like a fee waiver? And oftentimes students ask me, is that something that I can have, and how do I get it? So let's go ahead and jump into the fee waiver portion of the dashboard of the common application. All right, present slides. So this is what the Common App account looks like when you log in. You will use the college search area to find the different schools that you're interested in, type them in, and then add them. And then they will be added into your dashboard in My Colleges areas. The Common App tab is where all the information that you give here is in common. And if you apply to multiple universities, this is the stuff that goes to every university. So we're not going over every single thing in the Common App. Like I mentioned, we're really zoning in on the most asked questions. So the fee waiver question that people usually ask is located in the first tab. So I don't know if you saw this, but here's it's in the profile area in the first tab. And so Common App fee waiver is down here at the bottom. And then here's what you'll see. It'll give you some eligibility requirement for the fee waiver. Many of these eligibility requirements, if not all of them, are really focused on American students. And so things like, are you within the income guidelines to get food stamps essentially in the United States? Or are you in a low income housing provided by certain organizations in the United States? So a lot of these bullet points aren't going to be relevant to a student that lives in Canada. So really you need to focus on this final bullet point, which is providing a supporting statement from a student official who can say that you're eligible for a fee waiver. Well, what does that mean to be eligible? Essentially, you should be a low income student in order for your guidance counselor to indicate that you're eligible for a fee waiver. As you can see, many of these options, even if it's not something that's at your school, having a free or reduced lunch, being eligible for certain federal aid programs would be causes to get a fee waiver. So if this is a circumstance of you and your family where you feel that you would need this type of aid, you can ask, essentially, you'll click this button here. And once you say yes and you provide a fee waiver signature, your counselor is going to be asked to verify your eligibility. And so your counselor is going to receive a message in their system where they'll say yes or no. Now, just because your guidance counselor said yes doesn't mean that you'll necessarily get a fee waiver. So what can happen is you need to meet one of the requirements. Your counselor has to confirm that they believe you're eligible, but then that goes to the university, and the university can either accept or not accept the waiver. If they accept, it means you'll pay $0 to apply to that university. So essentially, when you apply, you don't pay, you've asked for the fee waiver, but a university might reject the waiver. So that means they'll essentially send you a bill. From what I understand, the way they do this is they usually send you an email that notifies you that your application is not complete until you pay the fee. And so at that point, you have to decide whether or not you're going to pay the fee to complete your application. if you do not, essentially, it's going to be incomplete and your application will not be reviewed. So just know you can ask for fee waivers, but you may or may not receive them. So the information that comes from your counselor is helpful in determining if that is something that's required for you. Another interesting thing in the Common App is there's actually a number of schools that do not require you to pay. There are schools that have $0. So when you're doing your search in the search area I showed you before, you can search for schools that have no fees. There's another area that I think is really, really cool in the Common Application that I'm going to show you a little bit later. Okay, so moving on to question number 3. What visa type do I indicate? So this is also a very specific question that students often will ask me. So basically, when you are in the geography and nationality section in the Common App, there is a question about whether or not you'll be applying for a visa. So I'll go ahead and get you over to that section, and I'll tell you how to answer that one. So the geography and nationality section is right above the fee waiver section. So they're right next to each other. And in this area, you need to indicate all your countries of citizenship. So if you are an American citizen and you indicate that in this area, you'll also need to include a social security number. Most will just put Canada, as this might be the case for many of you. And do you currently hold a valid US visa? So typically for students who have a US visa, that might be because your parents are working there. Maybe you have some sort of dependent visa, or maybe you have some sort of visitor visa. But usually we don't hold visas from Canada because we don't get visitor visas when we go across the border. So just indicate no, and that's very normal. But if you do have something, do click yes and indicate the information. And then this is the question that holds people up. Do you intend to apply for a new or different US visa? So you can just simply click no. Like, as a Canadian, they will issue you the proper paperwork. They'll give you an I-20 that you need to cross the border. So if you click no, that's not a problem. And also, because Canadians don't technically apply for an F1 visa, this question feels confusing. If you do click yes, then I do recommend putting F1 student visa, because that would be the class of student that you would be. Again, whether you click no or click yes, F1 student, you will get the proper paperwork. The university knows what to do. So either way, it's not the wrong answer. They're both okay answers, and you will be fine. Moving on to question number 4 and question number 5. So these are questions I get really, really frequently. In the education section, you are asked to include a ranking and a grade point average. So these two things are both in the same section, and they often confuse people because in Canada, in most circumstances, high schools do not rank their students and also don't create grade point averages. And to be clear, a grade point average is when your grades are averaged out and has some sort of official average on your transcript. So if you have all your grades out of 100 on a transcript and then have at the bottom an average of those numbers, of all of those numbers, that's a grade average. But on most Canadian transcripts, they don't do that. They don't include an average. So then you don't have an average, right? So if you don't have an average and you don't have a ranking, how do you complete this section? So let's go ahead and jump right in, and I'll show you how. So now we're going to toggle over to the education section, where we will then find the area about grades. So you do need to include anything that has a red star, you have to complete. So if you're not sure what your graduating class size is, then just ask your guidance counselor and they should have that information for you. Class rank reporting. You can see that one of the options is none. So you can just select none, easy peasy. It's also a non-required question, but I do feel like since none's the answer, it's probably a good idea to include that. As you can see, for grade scale reporting, this is not required to include a cumulative GPA or a GPA weight, particularly if the scale that you're reporting is none. The second you choose something from the scale, the cumulative GPA becomes a required question. So if you did include 100, you can't get away with not including a GPA. So clear your answer. Oh, clear your answer is if you do something like in here. Let's say you picked weighted. You can clear your answer if you put something there and then simply click none, and it becomes a non-required question, and that's it. So this is really how most Canadian students should be completing this information. The university is going to get your grade information on the transcript that's submitted by your guidance counselor. Moving on to question number 6. And now the questions are going to get a little bit longer. And like I said, if I've skipped something where you have a major question, put it in the Q&A section. We can do a screen share. We can go through that question together. So I'm going to tackle the top 10, but happy to hit 11, 12, 13, whatever questions you still have. So which type of honors are appropriate to include? There's a section where you can include honors and achievements, and you can include up to 5 of them. It should be, it does say that they should be academic in nature, but that doesn't just mean honors from your school. So I think sometimes students think, oh, an academic honor, I got honor roll at my school. Yeah, of course, that's an academic honor, but so is any other award or achievement that's related to academics. So for example, if you're part of any sort of a club, like Model UN or DECA, where there's competitions and things where you get awards, robotics club, anything where you might receive an achievement of some kind, you can include those because those are adjacent to school and they are academic in nature. Math and science contest results. So if you do like say the Waterloo math competition or science fair, then those things should be in there. If again, if you've received an achievement or gotten some sort of result worth bragging about. Publications. So if you publish either, maybe you're a writer and you've published an essay in a magazine, or you are a scientist and you have done research that's been published, those can be included. Scholarships. Anytime you've been selected for a scholarship, you have been awarded something, and it's usually related to your academic merits. So that can be included. And essentially anything you've been selected for. If there's something where there was a competition and part of your inclusion is related to being a student, then include it. So for example, we promote the Youth Ambassadors program here at Education USA. It's one of our State Department programs. Only 13 students from across Canada are selected, and part of their grades and being a strong student is part of the selection process. And there is, even though it's mostly community service and leadership focused, they do have to work with their school a bit. So even though it's not necessarily an academic award, it is an award and it is related to being a student and qualities that are important to student success, leadership, community service. So even though it's adjacent, it does make sense in that category. The areas that make a little less sense and would be out of scope are usually athletics, unless it's an award for being a top, student athlete where you've gotten a good grade average. But usually athletic awards like best defenseman don't really make sense in the honors area. Same with employment. If usually employment awards are really far away from academic awards, particularly if you received a promotion at work or something like that. This is not really the best place to include that information. That information usually should be just included in the activities list under the activity itself. And we'll talk about the activities list later. So let's just quickly look at where the honors section lives on the application. So underneath the grades area, you can see honors is down here. So you can say no if you don't want to include any honors, but I do like really rack your brain and try to include as many honors as you can. This list is important, particularly if you are looking at a more selective university. You want to make sure that you've got some stuff here. So like I mentioned, something like a silver medal, which in the Ottawa Carleton District Board is something pretty, it's like a standard language, but it's standard for the district here, not necessarily for the United States. So don't just put silver medal because people won't know what that is. Put what it means, over a 90% average. I don't remember how many characters you have here, but it is quite a few, maybe around 100. So you can include some descriptions. This is indicated as a school activity, so you don't need to put comma name of high school. But if this was a larger activity, like a state or regional or a national award, you should absolutely include the name of the organization here as well. So as an example, top delegate, international MUN, and actually I should spell the whole thing out, Model UN Paris, so location, you can say France to make sure they know it's not Paris, Texas. And that this was an international award, right? So make sure that you have enough information in this section to really understand when it is. You can include how many years you received this award. So again, something like a school award you might receive for multiple years, whereas something like this particular honors probably was just a one-time thing. You can also postgraduate means the year after you graduated. So if you've taken a gap year, but if you are a student from Quebec, oftentimes the way that students from Quebec will use these is 9 would be, consider that Sec 3, Sec 4, Sec 5, first year of CEGEP and second year of CEGEP for postgrad. You can use one of the other areas on your application. We'll describe where you can describe that that's what you're doing. So that's something I usually tell Quebec students to do. And then you can continue to add other honors here and then hit continue when you're finished. Definitely an important section to make sure that you're standing out on your application. Question number 7, how do I complete the activities list, especially with so few characters? Okay, the activities list is always a challenge because it is an area where you have a lot to complete and very narrow spaces in which to do it. So first and foremost, what do I even include on an activities list? Activities lists include up to 10 activities. As you saw, you have 5 honors and awards. So sometimes something fits a little better as an honor and award and not as much as an activity, or vice versa. If you're a person who's involved in a lot of activities, you do have to narrow things down to 10, maybe cut a few out that are less important to you, and also maybe combine a couple that are maybe the same. Sometimes students are like, well, I'm on like 2 different volleyball teams, but I don't think it really matters to make them 2 separate activities. Could it just be one? Yeah, absolutely. You can combine it into one thing and include both teams. Activities are anything that are not a school assignment. So essentially, homework, not an activity, something that you had to do in order to write some sort of big research paper, not an activity. But anything else could be something that you could put on your activity list. Essentially, think of it as an accounting for your out of school time. So that can include both formalized and non-formalized activities. What does that mean? Well, a formalized activity would be something like a club or a sport, something in the arts like theater, competitions, work, unpaid work, volunteering. So anything where you have to show up somewhere with a group, you lead a group, you're part of a group, or you're individually competing for something, like these are all formalized activities in some way. There's an organization that you're a part of, but there's also non-formalized activities, a hobby. You might spend a lot of time knitting. Maybe it's something you do an hour a day. So out of your week, you spend 7 hours on this activity, but it's just something you do for fun or to make sweaters for your friends. So these kinds of activities that do take up a good deal of time can also be on the activities list, even though there's no organization that you're part of. It could just be me doing a thing that I enjoy doing. Passion projects like learning a language, doing in-depth research on something on your own, whether that's through reading or the internet. So there's a lot of different students come up with all sorts of different ways that they enjoy a passion project. It could be like building an app in your free time. Family responsibilities. If you are responsible for watching a younger sibling or taking care of an elderly relative, and that takes up a good deal of your time, that is something that you should include in your Common App. Oftentimes, if you're responsible for watching a younger sibling after school, it means maybe you can't join certain after school activities. So that accounts for time after school. I'm not just not doing anything, I'm actually helping my younger siblings with their homework, for example. Or religious or cultural activities, which can sometimes be formalized. You might be part of a certain organization, or they might be more informal. So those are just some examples of things that might take up some of your time and you might not realize that you should include on your Common App. Should or can include. There's nothing that you absolutely need to. When it comes to ordering the activities, it's up to you on how you want to do it. But the Common App itself does encourage you to include your the activities that you want to highlight the most up at the top. So they're really saying, like, put your top activity at the top, whatever that is to you. And so what indicates a top activity? Well, what's most important to you? What are the most recent? And then from there, also, what are most recent activities? Those should be towards the top. Where do you have the most responsibilities? So maybe things where you have a leadership position. What do you spend the most time on? Definitely things that if you're spending 20 hours a week on something currently, I would expect that to be closer to the top of your activities list. Then as you move through the list and get closer to the bottom, that's where you should put things that are older, maybe shorter term, things that were less meaningful, and potentially your hobbies. Now, hobbies, if they're meaningful, take up more time, then you might put them towards the top of the list. But I find students who are like, oh, I like to run just to, like, I think of it more as like stress relief. Oh, my stress relief is to play the guitar on my own 3 times a week for an hour. Okay, well, it's 3 hours a week. It's just to chill out. That's a great number 10 activity. So I think an informalized activity usually works pretty well as a number 10. So let's go ahead and jump back into the Common App and we can look at how this looks more practically. The activities have their own tab. It's over here. And the things that we just went over are basically, some examples of activities are here. You can see they very specifically say family responsibilities and hobbies, as well as the more formalized things like clubs or sports, and any experience that's been meaningful to you. So that gives you a lot of leeway. And then you can see list the activities in the order of their importance to you. Now, I think that that's a pretty vague statement. So hopefully what I gave you helps you a little bit more understanding a good order. So yes, hopefully you have activities to report. You will be able to pick a category for your activity. I recommend not using, well, you can use other club or activity, but just make sure if you find yourself using that a lot, that you really start scrolling through all the different labels and see if there's other options, because there's actually a lot of different types of categories. So, science, math, school spirit, robotics, research, religious, different musical opportunities, LGBT, junior ROTC. Now, this is a very American language. Junior ROTC would be the same as like cadets in Canada. So if you're doing any sort of cadet training, I would suggest indicating it with this category. Any unpaid work, I don't think co-op is a category. It's not. So if you're doing any sort of co-op or unpaid work, indicate that as an internship. See if you're just teaching yourself foreign language, there's a category for that. So there's a lot of different options. Cultural, that's a pretty large scale category. There's an environmental category. And I think one that confuses people is career oriented. Career oriented would be like if you shadowed a doctor, or you joined a certain club where you learned more about career options. That would be career oriented. But if you're actually doing work, there's two work categories. There's work paid. So definitely, if you're doing any work that's paid, you should include work paid. And then unpaid work is essentially volunteer work. So community service or volunteer. So those are the two categories for paid and unpaid work. If you have any other questions about these type of choosing these different categories, I'm happy to help. The other thing to know about athletics, this is other American language. A varsity or JV activity is a school sport, and a club sport is outside of school. So how do you make room for everything? Now, take a look at the characters available for each thing. There are 50 characters available. Oh, and this one is going to be journalism. Let's pick the right. There you go. So there's 50 characters available for the description. There's about 100. There are 100 available for the organization name. So if we just put school senior editor and the page, we wouldn't know what the page is. And in the description, you could put editor for the school newspaper, but we already have the editor here. So that would be repeating words. And we can further explain what the organization is up to 100 characters here. So there's an opportunity to use these word counts, which are another 150, sorry, not word counts, character counts, to help with your descriptions. And then that way, when you get to this area, you're focusing more on impact. Now, I know it says describe this activity, but really what you want to focus on is this second part, is what you accomplished and recognition received. So really either the impact you had in this activity or what impact it had on you. So for example, there's an opportunity to include a description that says a little more about your impact. Now, I think I mixed a couple of things here, but essentially instead of editor of school newspaper, you can include something like published 2 times per month for population of 1,500 students. And then you could maybe have something else. So you can see, get rid of the pronouns, start right with the action verb. You can do some like cutting corners with language in order to save some characters, depending on what it is you use. It needs to be something that's pretty normal, like 2 times, 2x. I think that's okay to do. Something like population, you could even, you might be able to get away with pop. And then really focus on what are the things that you did. Now, even if you participated in this thing for multiple years, you can really focus on what your top leadership position was, but you could also say like formerly sports desk or something like that if you want to also show what other positions you had. Because you have up to 50 characters, there's usually space for that. You indicate what time of the year you participate, And then this part's hard too. How many hours do you spend per week? Well, some things are variable, right? Like if you're making art, you might be spending 1 hour on it one week and 12 hours on the next week. So you just do your best to try to create an accounting for your time. Try to average it out. Try to think about approximately how much time you spend on it per year. The intent to participate in a similar activity in college, nobody's going to hold you to this, but basically you're just saying, like, yes, I really love writing for the newspaper. I would love to keep doing this. Or no, that's not my top priority. And I'm probably going to explore other activities. So that's up to you on what you want to do there. There you go. So that's the activities section. I know that can kind of confuse people. I've got a couple questions coming in about activities. Someone says, if a lot of our activities focus on one theme, is that a disadvantage? Not necessarily. If basically you're trying to just show who you are and what you do, I would say though, like, let's say you're applying for computer science and you go, well, I'm involved with 3 computer science activities, so I'm just going to put 3 things and I'm not going to talk about any of my other activities. I don't recommend that. I would recommend, like, oh, put the 3 things that you think are related to your major, but if you're also playing an instrument and doing these other activities, include them. That's a good thing. In the US, they like to see that. But if you have 10 activities and they're all really around, a sport or your art or whatever, that's fine. So that so that is totally okay. All right. Great question. Thank you. All right. That was the only clarification I saw for this. Oh, I see another activity question. Should we include our school club contributions in the honor section or the activities section? Well, it really depends. There's no cut and dry answer to that. So some people will, if you've got 5 top honors that are really exceptional, and you can't fit all of your honors in the honor section, you might include some of those honors in the activities section. So I'm part of this school club and I got this particular award at this club, but you feel like on the honor section, you've got more impressive things. On the flip side, if you're struggling to figure out what should go on your awards list, you might pull stuff off the activities list that makes sense there. So there's no complete right or wrong answer there. Okay, great questions. We're going to keep moving along. I realize we are heading into the final quarter of the discussion today. And the next question is, how do I write a good essay? That is a big question and a main part of the Common Application. So here are just some tips when it comes to tackling your essay. First, you should start with a brainstorm. There are a number of topics that are available to write about on the Common App. And I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. And so basically the Common App essay part is in the writing section. So when you click on the writing section, it is called the personal essay. And you can see up at the top that not every university actually requires you to submit an essay. So you'll see on the top of whichever schools you indicated in your dashboard, which ones require the essay and which ones do not. And then you'll see the 7 prompts that you can write about. They cover a lot of ground: background, identity, interest, obstacles you've encountered, questioning a belief, gratitude, sparking a period of growth, something that's really engaging and captivating to you, and my favorite, write about anything you want. So essentially, you have all the options available to you in the world. So as we come back to the slides, you'll see that it does help to start with brainstorming. And if you go to the handout section, I've actually included a brainstorming activity. So if you're just getting started on your essay, I do recommend downloading that to help you out. Start with thinking about something personal that you might want to write about. This is not a cover letter. This is a story from your life. that you want admissions to read to learn a little bit more about who you are. So once you've started your brainstorm and really thinking about what you want to write, then go to the prompts and decide which one might be the best structure for you. I find that sometimes you read somebody's ideas for an essay, and you go, okay, yeah, that could be essay topic 1, 2, or 5. It just comes down to how would you like to frame how you're speaking about this topic. Then once you kind of decide what prompt you want to answer and which topic you want to explore, free write and explore your topic. And by that, I mean, I think sometimes students really sit down at their computer with the intention of writing like their final draft of their essay right away. If you do that, it can be really hard to get started. I do recommend allowing yourself to either hand write or just kind of free write type, however you like to do it. But essentially just don't give yourself boundaries. Don't give yourself, I have to write this many paragraphs or this many words. Just start writing about your topic and exploring it. And then you can start to see like, what are the points that make sense? What are the stories that come out? And what do you really want to focus on? Once you do that, then create an outline and really determine what your structure is going to be to best tackle your topic. And then when you refine your draft, that's when you really need to make sure that everything's within the word count, which for the Common App needs to be under 650 or below. You need to make sure you've answered the prompt, that your topic and themes are clear throughout and have like a really strong introductory conclusion. Everything really wraps up in one package. And make sure you give it to multiple people for feedback. I'm happy to be one of those people and help provide that feedback. So once you're done with your essay, you can upload it in that area in the Common App that we just took a look at. And when you submit your application to a university, that information can no longer be changed for that school. But for any university you haven't applied to yet, you can continue to update and change that information. So, for example, if you applied in the early application period and you've realized that you want to update or change your essay or write something totally different for another school, you can do that. You don't have to submit the same essay. So if you would like to reach out and provide your essay, and you can do that. There's my email address. Some people just ask that. And I'll be giving my contact information again at the end. Don't forget about the supplemental essays. So when you go over to the My Colleges area, you will find that any university you're applying to might have additional essays that they need you to respond to. And they're sometimes in the writing area and sometimes they are not. So this is really, really important. Sometimes when you make a choice, a drop-down choice, you might find that you are presented with another essay. So I'm going to show you what I mean by that. Once you've made your college list, in the US we use the word college and university interchangeably, so just get used to that word. So once you've made your college list, they'll all show up here on the side. In any university that you're interested in, you'll see that they might have additional questions and they might even have an additional writing supplement. So you can see here for Brown that they have a writing supplement in this area. However, if you go into the questions area and you find that in the academics, if you choose one of the special programs, for example, you'd like to do the liberal medical education degree, which is popular, and you click that, there are 3 additional questions that need to be answered. Now, these questions are also outlined on the university's website, so you should always be on the website reviewing the information there. But when nothing was selected for this, that information was not available as a drop-down box. So do make sure that you are reviewing the university website for all their supplemental essays, and completing the stuff in the My Colleges area to ensure that you're not missing any additional essay information. And the last tips we have are, should I write the COVID essay and include additional information? So under the personal essay, there are two more writing assignments that you can choose or not choose to do. So let's see exactly where those are located. So if we go back to the Common App tab and we take a look on the side, back to the writing area, underneath that main essay that you're going to include is there's an additional information section, which has two essays you could choose to write. The first one is about COVID and whether, how that affected you and your family. And it's not just COVID, it's also natural disasters. So if your family has been subject to some sort of natural disaster, that has really affected your family. It includes your health, your well-being, your safety, future plans, education, anything. Then you can click yes and share 250 words on this topic. Now that we're a couple years out from the worst of COVID effects, I think students are not sure whether or not to write this essay. So reflect back on that time and what was affected. And even though it might be a couple years out for you, it might have been building block years for you at the beginning of high school that maybe would have allowed you to get more involved in a certain organization or meant that you had to stop doing something for a certain period of time. So I'm sure you're still feeling the effects of that. You don't have to have experienced a large scale tragedy in order to write this essay. This essay can be a space where you really just talk about the effects of COVID in your life and with your family. And then you can even use it to speak about something that maybe came out of it that was good. For some students, even when something difficult happens, it might be a learning moment. This was a huge challenge, but I also learned this about myself. So there's an opportunity to include that there if it makes sense for you. If you don't want to, you click no. Then there's this really, really great area, which is additional information. So essentially, you can provide any additional information up to 650 words that you wish. And that's, again, optional. Anything optional you don't have to do. Don't feel forced to do something. But if you want to clarify anything, provide additional information about your activities. Some people use this to do an extended resume. Some students write a full separate essay if there's something that they wanted to talk about but didn't want to put it in their main essay. Maybe it's something that's a personal issue but didn't want it to be the first thing an admissions officer read, but still wanted to include it, and maybe wanted it to be just still included in their application somewhere. This could be bullet points of just like certain things you want to clarify, or it could be another descriptive essay. So it's really up to you on whether you want to use this space and how you want to use it. There's really no wrong answer. So this is a really nice relief valve where there's no parameters and you can just use anything you felt like I wanted to include this, you can put it here. So thank you so much for joining us today. We have 5 minutes left and I see a number of questions that have come in. So I'm going to go ahead and address as many questions as I can. This webinar was recorded. Everyone will receive a recording afterwards, and eventually it will also go on our YouTube channel. So don't worry, you will have access to all of this information after the webinar is over. Recommendation letters. That's an important one. This is also a top question. We're going to call this question number 11. Where are the recommendation letters and where do they go? So let's go ahead and pop back over. It can be a little bit hard to find where to add your recommenders, but essentially when you click into My Colleges and you go to any one of the universities you want to apply to, there's an area that says recommenders and FERPA. you will need to uh, like essentially sign this FERPA authorization before you can go into this section. Basically, the first step of FERPA is just saying that I understand that the Common App is going to give my personal information to the universities that I apply to. Like I'm authorizing that you do that. So that makes sense, right? Please do that. I'm applying. Please send me the application. Please send the application. Check. I get that. Then the second part is whether or not you waive your rights to see all of your documentation coming from your recommenders. You should waive your right. You should do this because then the information remains confidential and the university knows that whatever they receive is to its truest form and they're not receiving a good recommendation letter because you're looking at it on the other side. So you should always waive your right. That is the best practice. And then click, yes, I understand, put your signature, and then you have to include today's date and save and close. Once you do that, you'll be able to invite your recommenders. You will indicate what kind of category your recommender is. So your counselor, you can only invite one counselor, so that needs to be your main guidance counselor at your current school. If you're inviting a teacher, you put their email, you choose the subject they teach, yes or no, and then specifically when you're on a drop down for some schools, they might ask whether or not the teacher needs to complete a additional evaluation for that university. Okay. In the application, it will also tell you how many teacher letters are required or optional, and if there's other letters that are also optional. You can also add me as an advisor if you like. That enable the preview, and I can look at your application. You can add up to 3 advisors on the Common App. So once you send the letter, once you invite a teacher, they'll get an email and then they'll upload the letter. The letter should not have the name of any one university because it should be able to go to any school on your list and not say, I really want this student. The student's going to be a great fit for Boston University, and then it goes to all the other schools that you're applying to. All right. Some other great questions coming through. Do you need a visa as a Canadian citizen if you plan to study in the United States? You will receive the same document as all other international students. It's called the I-20, but you won't apply for a visa. Can international students apply for FAFSA? No, they cannot. FAFSA is the American Student Aid Program, and international students cannot apply for that. You may have achievements as part of a team. For instance, a sports team that won the championship or robotics team that won the competition. Would we include this in the activities or honors? I'm unsure because it isn't a personal achievement. You can choose where to put it. So for example, if you're part of a sports team, it should be in your activities. Sports teams championships don't usually go in the honors section because the honors should be academic and focused. But let's go with the robotics team. So robotics team, you probably spend a lot of time on, so it definitely should be in your activities list. If you received a big award for it, you might also include it in your awards section, but you would just have the name of the award related to robotics. So it's okay to have them in both sections. You just wouldn't then list the award also in your activities list. So in the activities list, you'll describe your contributions to the team, and then you could put the team award in the robotics section. All right. Do you recommend writing a different essay for all the universities or stick to the same one? Just write one. The goal of the Common App is for you to write one Common App essay that goes to every single school. That's what's helping the application be useful to you and streamlined. You definitely don't need to write a different university essay for each university. That's what the supplementals are for. So the universities that have supplemental essays will ask questions like, why do you want to go to this school? That needs to be a unique essay. Do we apply to good question. Do we apply to specific programs in an American school or the school as a whole? Okay, so you apply to the undergraduate class as a whole, but you indicate preferred majors, and oftentimes you can rank them. So let's go back over to the screen share and we can look at how this might look at a certain university. I haven't been in here before, so we're just going to fly by the seat of our pants on this one. So typically, for any university, you will go to the academics area, the academics tab, and that's usually where you indicate what major you're interested in. Oh, nope, not for this school. Maybe that was in the general area. What term do you wish? If you're taking scores or not, first year students, fee waivers. Nope, this one didn't have it. Okay, sorry. Go back over to Brown. See if we can find one really quickly where we can see where you pick the major. Here we go. So it tells you the policy of the school. So a lot of schools will have a little preamble that will tell you that you can choose a degree and a concentration. And at this school in particular, they're saying you're not making a final decision because we are a liberal arts school and we know that you might change your mind, and that's okay. But you can choose, like, I want to be an applied mathematics student, and that my second choice is to be or my concentration will be chemistry. Okay. So most schools will have something along this lines, and it just depends on the type of university on how set in stone those things are. So for example, if you're applying to a business program, it's really important that you indicate that because it might be a separate program that you're getting into and not part of just the main university programs. What if a counselor doesn't have time to complete the school part? Can someone else do it? It needs to be someone from your school. So because it needs to be information like how many students go to the school, like demographic information, grading information. So if a counselor can't do it, it needs to be another administrator or teacher or some official at the school who can provide that information. It could be a principal, but it definitely needs to come from the school. All right. Let's see. So SAT score requirements. So not every university needs an SAT or an ACT. There's actually a whole other website that I recommend using called fairtest.org in order to determine whether or not the school needs a standardized test. However, under college information at this point in the Common App, there is a standardized testing policy under each school with a test policy information page. So you can place all your schools in Common App and also find out the test policy as you've added them to your list and whether or not the test will be required. So that's really useful because you're like, oh, I'm interested in this particular school. Cool. The test is never going to be required for me. So I can feel free to go ahead and not do that. You can also see the fees involved and also whether or not they use the courses and grades section, which we didn't go over today, but is something that most universities don't use. I also wanted to quickly show something really cool. And before we get going, I had promised to show this. So in your dashboard area, you can get a summary of all of your schools that you're applying to. And this is really cool because it has all the different deadlines, the different fees, whether or not they use courses and grades, need an essay, the testing policies, et cetera, et cetera. So it has a full summary of the universities you're interested in, and you can even download it. So I really like that feature. And what's even cooler is you can do it for all colleges. And so you could even put all colleges on the Common App and you can sort. So you could say that oh, I want to see test policy and see which ones, maybe I want to say which ones have like a never required policy, and you could toggle to that page and see that. And also my favorite is which schools have no fee to apply we're international students. So you could actually like find out which ones all have $0 to apply, and you could add additional universities to your list based on the fact that they have no fee in order to apply to that school. So that's another really cool feature that I think people don't often notice because there's not a lot in the dashboard area, but that's a really neat thing. So we do have a lot of additional questions coming through, and unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to answer all of them. So we're going to go ahead and go back to the slide where it has my contact information. So if your question didn't get answered, please feel free to go ahead and send me an email, ottawa@educationusa.org, and I can follow up with you to make sure that you get your question answered. Because we are over time, I do want to make sure we wrap up. And I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Again, enjoy the recording if you need more information, or share it with your friends. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a lovely day, and we'll see you next time. Have a good night.